Hello and welcome back to Good Game Nation, where we bring you all things TCG. My name is Preston. I'm here with Sam. Say hello.
Hello, it's Monday. It's Meta Monday.
Meta Monday on a Monday after a big tournament. It doesn't get any better than this. We had
Yes.
the Miyagi, I believe is a decent pronunciation of it, yesterday or Saturday night for the West. And we had two really cool decks final for the final match. We got to finally get an official top tier Whitebeard list and our first Law championship winner, which is incredible. We got another new leader. I'm super excited to review these decks. Um, if you want to know where we got these lists, the official One Piece TCG Twitter posts the top two decks after the end of their big tournaments. Um, Whitebeard got second. Super exciting match. We'll make sure those get leaked in the description down below so that you can watch them. If you want to watch just absolute top tier players playing at the top of their game, catch those VODs on YouTube. Um, you want to jump into Whitebeard first?
Absolutely jump into Whitebeard first. We've covered one Whitebeard deck, I think, so far, and it was interesting, but this is definitely a more tuned up Whitebeard version of this deck. And the first thing we have to acknowledge is the lack of Whitebeard himself here. No 10 drop Whitebeard, and jumping from set 1 into set 2, Shanks has been absolutely deleted. We no longer play Shanks. It has been replaced by Whitebeard, and that is because when you play him, he gives you that immediate 2k buff to your leader, and that is a credible defensive play. So he protects you while he's also clearing out blockers with this amazing effect. So why isn't he in here? What is the reasoning? Those are one of the cards that definitely defines the deck, so it's weird not seeing him here.
Yeah, and you would expect the Edward Newgate to play the character card because
Yeah.
it has so many advantages to this leader, not being able to take life off of your own effects, all these different things. I think it's too slow. If we're looking at a very fast meta where there's Zoro that can take several life a turn with Rush, there's the other deck we're about to review that just has a consistent output. You have Avank that is probably still around, even if it isn't topping, with a consistent output with a Luffy that does double attack, right?
Yep.
So having to play 9 Dawn on a card where you're not recovering any of your Dawn, leaving you with 1 Dawn open, no options to spread anything out, I think is the reason. It's just too slow, and it doesn't give you enough options for defense. Um,
In
we're doing like Radical Beam and
Right.
Guard Point. You might need both of those in one turn, and if you only have 1 Dawn open, you can't even add a Dawn to a character to attack. So it's scary, I think.
Scary, and I think it also a testament to how fast the game is right now. Speed is one thing, but game length. You were saying earlier as well that most games are going 4 or 5 turns. Full turns total.
Mhm.
That's not a lot of opportunity to play this Whitebird. So the game is decided way before this. So let's cater to that time. And this Edward Newgate does a lot of things well. He's maximizing strength with Moby Dick. Moby Dick's a card that we talked about, but at a 4 count is really high. But we have the ability to discard cards with Marco. So that's the argument we made for Onigashima same way back. You have to run 4 to make the deck good, but you had discard built in, right? You had Jack, you had Queen. So it's the same kind of mechanic, but Marco is the discarder here, and I really like that adaptation.
Yeah, and I think you absolutely need this card on board to finish games.
Yeah.
Uh, this deck is playing the vanilla 4 drop 6k, the vanilla 5 drop 7k. Those guys become 8 and 9 respectively. That's a disgusting attack if you're getting hit with that to be able to defend against something so large. You're either letting it through or you're spending a lot of your own resources to not lose a life on that attack. And if you're defending characters, you probably are just letting them go because it's not worth 3 or 4 cards out of counter from your hand to save a 9k attack.
Yeah.
Um, so the Moby Dick is super essential. Stuff that is interesting here is only 2 ace when you're playing for Seaquake. Seaquake hits 3k or less. So if your main KO card, at least that's what it feels like to me, is your main one drop KO card is only hitting 3K, you might want to have more minus power, and you're only running Otama and Squard for that in a reasonable number to be able to do more with your turn. So it's interesting, but when you think about targets, you're targeting your opponent's Vista so they can't attack with them. You're targeting your opponent's blockers so that you can push through without having to worry about that, force them to use more resources. It's good. It just, like not knowing every card in the meta that is being played, it's a weird four of for me. Um, Especially when Vista's going to be able to attack the next turn after you use it. But I mean, for one cost, killing 3Ks up to what were we saying, max 7K with a sword
Score.
being played,
Yep.
it's not bad.
I think if we were building this deck against the whole meta with everything in mind, a lot of these cards would be not here, right? When we first
Right.
built this Whitebeard deck, I didn't play any of the Marcos, I didn't play any of the Joes because I was thinking of the meta as a whole, right? Like I don't think these cards are optimally the best or situated the best for that leader. However, when we play a very specific version of this meta, the meta that we're currently in with a lot of Kinemon, a lot of Zoro, I'm going to throw Kid in there. Even with Avank, a lot of these key cards that are being played to decide games are within this 3K to 5K range, right? You're playing your Dot on Swarm early. A lot of these guys are 3K and under.
Hmm.
If we're looking at most of the Kid branches, they're 3Ks and unders. Until we get to the 4 or 5 drops, 3Ks and unders. We're able to control this early game. And I think that's where Edward really struggles, is making sure I don't lose all of my life in the first 2 turns,
Hmm.
so I can play these aces and these king dudes and get to Moby Dick with these guys on board, which is the mid game is where this deck specifically accelerates. And if we think about, I'm going to switch over to the law. When we think about the matchup, I think that's probably why this matchup lost, because this law deck specifically caters to these first 3-4 turns heavily, heavily. And when Law hits that 5 on board, it's danger.
Yeah, just thinking about this deck being able to swarm the board with a lot of one drops and then not be penalized with it. So if you play an Otama or a Makino to get their quick effect, their on play effect, you're not going to be penalized with them sitting on the board, taking up space, or having to play over the top of them to get them off the board when you have five. It's just as soon as you get five, you're popping those back to your hand for a five drop. You're either going Zoro if you feel comfortable going super aggressive, or you're going into one of the laws that give you more added value. And of course, the Drake that's going to be a pretty decent attacker, especially if you're going to be able to run Law into Drake to restand X Drake for another attack.
Yeah. Again, if we were building this deck for the general meta, I would probably advise you to play this Law in a general meta. However, again, when we think about this very scope of this tournament, Law, even in set one, was a middle of the pack shower, right? He really wanted to see what the meta was playing because I think Law caters to that style more, and that's why we've seen Law in set one appear in the middle, and that's why, again, I think we're seeing it here. It is a good leader, and it can play all of these good cards. Like, we saw the Zoro play the dot on mechanic, and I think Law just plays it better. You're able to maximize it by playing these really good green one drops, and it goes right into your mid game perfectly. Jet Pistol again is in a perfect spot in the meta where it kills basically everything with Otama. And that really helps Law against those rogue matchups. I don't know how this Law deck would have done into purple, if purple's still a thing. I don't know how this deck would have done against Avank specifically, but this Jet Pistol really helps you kill those Avanks, those Luffys. So you found answers to those top decks, so let's figure out how to beat those middle of the pack decks, and it's with their cards. It's with their cards.
Yeah, and when I'm looking at these two decks, I feel like they're both counter meta to what we've been seeing lately.
Yeah.
These are decks that are responsive to really fast decks, they're responsive to really consistent decks. Um, so being able to KO pretty much anything with Jet Pistol and an Otama or Vista, and just being able to run with all of these different combos with Law, I feel like is a super big counter meta pick that allows you to play the meta because Zoro was meta at some point and probably is still pretty relevant. But play it better because you get that extra color that gives you utility. Green is great for that. Being able to restand stuff with the starter deck law, being able to swap stuff out so you get 2 shambles with your super rare from the set is incredible. So you're getting the really great red stuff from Dadan and Nami searches. You're getting your really great green stuff with Jewelry Bonnie being able to search a handful of cards. I mean, it's more than a handful, right? I guess there's 24. I'm
It's
looking at the
more, yeah.
keywords. You're getting a lot of searches off of that. 20 total, I guess, because you can't search yourself.
Right.
That's a decent amount of things. Like you can hit Jet Pistol. I believe Jet Pistol was searched on more than one occasion off of Nami. Does Jet Pistol have Supernova? I
It
don't
sure does.
Yeah, it's searchable by both of your big searchers, like your key searchers. And Dadan is searching the rest of your key searchers. So it's a very fun deck to watch. The player was, I think, really skilled, and that's why he got this far. I think it takes, you have to be able to see the most optimal move
Yep.
in a time period where you're not being like called out for slow play. Luckily, these big tournaments have a little bit, I think, a decent timer on these top best of one timers. So it felt like they were sitting around thinking for like 2 or 3 minutes, but the matches with this law deck ended with like 8 to 10 minutes, I think, on the timer. So it felt like it was a very slow game when it came to like the mid game, but the player was just spot on with his plays. Being able to always have 5 on board, even if stuff gets cleared by your opponent, getting 5 on board again to run those leader effects is super key. And the pilot of this deck just did a phenomenal job. And I believe there's 2 matches that he played in that we got to watch, which was great. Skillful matchup, total counter meta, and just a really interesting deck to watch get played at this level.
Yeah, at this point we've had the game for a while now, and one of the things I'm very confident is that Law, you need a strong pilot. You have to be a strong pilot to play Law, and that Law will appear in the middle of your meta when you least expect it. Law has access to 2 of, I'd argue, the strongest colors when we consider that they have been adding to their colors each set. Right, red has added things consistently that boost Straw Hats or boost red naturally, or green. We're going to continue to get Supernovas / really good effects. Right, it's a combination of these things, and Law is going to be continue to be the beneficiary of that. And yeah, these decks are completely counter meta, and if we think about these 2 decks specifically, it's really unfortunate that this Whitebeard deck got paired with this Law deck, because looking at these cards, it's very hard to find an optimal way for this Whitebeard to win. It's everything that Whitebeard wants to do. Law is doing faster and slightly better. It doesn't have any searchers, doesn't have any draw, and Law is just full of it, and you're pulling out a lot of the same cards, a lot of the same ideas and mechanics, and Law just executes them slightly better. And we might be trending up right now, where we're going to see more Law right before set 3 gets dropped. So it feels like set 1 all over again a little bit.
Yeah, the Law deck's very masterfully built, and it was masterfully piloted, and that's why it wins. I think if Whitebeard was tiered up against the Kinemon or any of the other... So Kinemon was the other top 4 deck. It was 2 Whitebeards, a Kinemon, and a Law. Yeah. Law beat Kinemon, Whitebeard beat Whitebeard. So we got 2 new decks in the final. And if it was any other matchup, if he was playing Kinemon, I think Whitebeard wins. I think that's what they're built for. So.
I think this is built to beat Kinemon. It's hard, in my mind, it's hard for Kinemon to deal with Marco. I'm trying to figure out, like, Marco's a great card into that Kinemon matchup specifically, I think. And I don't know how they're supposed to deal with that guy, but this Law deck absolutely has options to deal with that guy. So It's a matchup thing. And I think that's where good card games exist anyway. Is it becomes a matchup triangle. Except the matchup triangle was already drawn and it didn't have law in it, so now we might have to redo it. It might be turned into a matchup pentagon. Who knows?
Yeah.
It's exciting for a card game that's still very new to have that. So I'm into it. I'm into these new decks. I'm into the law. Good tournament.
Yeah. Absolutely. We'll link it in the description down below so that you can watch it. It was a master class on good piloting. But that's all the commentary I have. I don't see a downside for either of these decks. It's hard to criticize the top two decks in the
Yeah.
meta right now.
What do I know?
Um, I'm not topping championship tournaments, that's for sure. And I'm not playing Whitebeard very good if you go check out that match. But thank you all for watching. If you got this far, hit that thumbs up. Let us know what you think in the description down below. And until next time, we'll see you around. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye, guys.